to Invictus Motors. We've got this McLaren 570S. This is the Spider variant, and just to begin and to start the video I've just got to say how much I love these dihedral opening and closing doors, because I think in terms of aesthetically, stylistically, this is so much car for the money. And in this video I will discuss and talk about everything the McLaren 570S and the Spider has to offer, but also to kind of talk about a little bit of the history and the context of the 2011, where McLaren entered the fall of the mass-produced road cars, really, because prior to this, let's not cover that, but the whole journey for McLaren's begun in 2010, 2011 with the McLaren 12C. And then, lo and behold, in 2016, they came with the 570S, the 570 GT, and the 540. And this generation of the McLaren is completely different to the 12C, you know, different chassis, platform, the suspension, and both the exterior and the interior is a completely revised car. But we're here to talk about the 570S Spider and what it really means to me. And I think one of the best things about the 570S Spider is not just the complete carbon tub, and a lot of the times with a convertible you think it compromises the monocoque chassis aspect of the car, but because this is a carbon tub and how far it comes up, it's still a very stiff, you know, monocoque chassis like. But the roof, if you were to just see it closing up, it's a work of art and does not take away from the car in the slightest of ways. And this is now with the roof closed. And with the roof closed now, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between this being a coupe or a convertible. But the Spider, the lines are just so exquisite, like these scoops coming up. They're just beautiful, elegant, and truly a work of art and a feat of engineering. And from a feedback point of view, just from the sound point of view, this glass you can lower in a Spider, and it just offers you so much feedback, and the sound offered from the engine is unbelievable. Just to quickly show you onto the inside, the way these doors open up is simply a press of a button underneath. You've got the sport seats here. These are the leather with the contrast stitching of the sort of the McLaren flagship orange color, the orange seat belts, and you've got the Alcantara carbon steering wheel, as well as the extended leather package going all the way to the front with the contrast stitching that you can find around the speaker systems over there. This also has the premium sound system and basically the carbon that you find around the screen there, the carbon around the central console, this part here finishing in carbon. You've got the Alcantara headlining, the visors finished in Alcantara. So with the rear view camera, front and rear parking sensors, the front axle lift, you just offered so much for your money. And then of course, if you're wanting something with a bit of practicality, at a press of a button, we open that front boot up. And that front boot does offer a lot of storage. You can easily get 2 medium-sized suitcases and still have space here on one side remaining to put more stuff in there and bits and pieces there to the side. Or if you wanted to have some stuff in between where where you're sitting in the car. And color-wise, this is the papaya orange. This is McLaren's flagship color. I love the palladium silver blade, sort of that lower part of the car, showing that contrast in this beautiful dark gray with the alloys. These are the 19-inch alloys with all matching tires all around, the Pirellis. You've got the carbon brakes, and it being the 570S, you've got the more sharper, not just the front bumper in terms of lines, but also the side skirts, and the rear diffuser is more aggressive, and it's just got more of a road presence overall, just with all these subtle changes in comparison to i.e. the 540C. Now let's get inside for a test drive initially to just give you a bit of a context on the McLarens, and then we'll continue driving it more to tell you all about the performance and the various modes that you get when driving one of these, especially when you want to drive it a bit more spiritedly. Getting into a McLaren, it's honestly an absolute pleasure with the way the doors open, but once you're into this cabin space, I just love the fact that, as I said, on the later generation, you've got the rear view camera presented here rather than in this area up here. That's quite a crucial change. I think it makes a big difference when you are into a car like this, because even though it's quite a small car, you still want to have the visibility and be able to see all around it, and that rear view camera works fantastically well. This button there is for the parking sensors to activate or deactivate them, and the audio feedback is fantastic. And then obviously if you rotate this all the way around, the side folding door mirrors fold in, and I will just take it back out, and it does its job incredibly well. Another fantastic feature in one of these cars, and you know, it's quite useful especially on this private track that we are in coming into the dealership, is the front axle lift. And that can easily be literally at the lift of this, at literally pressing this stalk up, it says vehicle raising. And that is basically saying that your front axle lift has lifted up now, and the ping basically confirmed that it's in the right height, being raised mode. And another beauty is that that front axle lift doesn't drop unless you're doing, I think, anywhere between 35 to 40 miles per hour. Once we are onto the main road properly, I will tell you at exactly what speed that lift drops back. What I love about the McLaren also, as well as the 3.8 litre engine, is the 7-speed SSG transmission. That is a dual clutch transmission, meaning that you've got two clutches in the gearbox, a bit like the PDK for the Porsche, or the DCT for the BMW, or the ZF gearboxes. And what the clutches in the gearboxes do is that one clutch is working as of odd numbers and the other of even numbers. Therefore, the gear changes are absolutely seamless. So when you're into this sort of slow traffic and, you know, moving and stopping, moving and stopping at that sort of less than 30, 40 miles an hour, is great, because it's not sort of that jerky, you know, feedback that the gearbox is putting into your back. I mean, it's happens so seamlessly, and it's thanks to that gearbox, as well as, of course, the 3.8 litre twin turbocharged engine in this, that this McLaren 570S Spider is able to do 0 to 62 miles per hour possible in 3.2 seconds. This is just some really, really extraordinary number. And a top speed of at 40 miles an hour is when that front axle lift drops, and you can see it here on the screen saying that the vehicle auto lowering mode has kicked in. And so, yeah, going back to the performance numbers, at the top speed with the 7-speed SSG gearbox and the 3.8 litre twin turbo engine, that is 204 miles per hour. Brake horsepower, this produces 562 brake horsepower, 601 Newton meters of torque. So when it comes to performance numbers, I don't think anybody would want any more than what this has to offer. And all of this is just mind-blowingly quick and really supercar territory. But it is a supercar. Everything about it, the looks, the way it feels, the styling, the performance numbers. And do I want any more than what this has to offer? I think not really. And a lot of us sometimes spend time looking for our ultimate dream McLaren or our ultimate dream sort of a car. I think this is my dream car, even though I specialize in Porsches, and I think Porsches are everything to me and they're very dear to me. But at this price point, with the performance, with the reliability it has to offer, because I think they're incredibly reliable cars, as I've already said in my intro, this is a total complete package. So I hope I've done, you know, this review so far some justice before I drive this any further, that this is really a gem and a sweet spot of where you need to be in a supercar, and a supercar well achievable for under £90,000. Now for a bit of fun, what I also love about it is this cabin space. So even when you're doing 70, 80 miles an hour, this will shock you. You can actually still hold a conversation in this space. So not only aesthetically, once you've got that roof on or off, you know, ultimately you are in a sort of a coupe car, but you know, once that roof is down and you're in the Spider, the visibility, what you see, sort of the wind coming in, it's beautiful, just glorious to feel, to experience. But it doesn't take away from the intimate feel of having a conversation with your passenger or your partner, and doesn't make it a bit of a drag getting somebody in terms of that passenger seat with you to sit in a convertible car, and they are basically stopping you from driving it a bit spiritedly. And what we are going to do is exactly do that, is to drive it spiritedly. To activate putting this in sports mode, you first have to press the active button. Then what you do is, here it says handling is in sports. So I've put handling in normal mode, yeah? Whereas this is showing that the drivetrain is already in sports mode by it being in this middle part. But I've put it back into normal mode, just so you know that this is now in normal mode, especially when we have selected this to be in sports mode. And ideally this is where it should be beginning. But of course somebody lost when they've turned it off into the sports mode, both those things being in sports mode. So being in the normal standard mode, yes, I've got the active button pressed, but both the dials are in the complete normal mode. And you can also press a button here to put your gearbox in automatic, because if you press that then strictly puts the gearbox in manual mode, which is what we don't want. This button here, which is what we don't want. We want the auto feature, where it says next to 5 it says A, which means automatic. And if I was to drop it a gear, now into second gear, I'm using my pedals, doing a great job, enjoying the car, experiencing it for what it is. And if I just wanted the car to go back into its normal auto mode, considering I had a bit of fun using the pedals, slowly the car will pick up and realize that I want you to go back into auto. And it will do this by itself without any further input from me. So it's great to drive as a completely normal standard car, even with all the performance modes included. The next bit we're going to do is to continue explaining what it's like by having the drivetrain in basically sports mode, as well as having the handling in sports mode, because having the handling in sports mode is basically stiffening the damper controls. These damper controls become a lot more stiffer, and that's what it's doing. And I don't think it's great for these roads, unless you're in beautiful roads in the south of France, Wales, Scotland, somewhere. But other than that, stick to your normal handling mode. So I'll go in there, active is selected, turn the handling to be in sports, and I'll turn the powertrain to also be in sports. Now everything is in sports, and I've not set to the gearbox to be in manual, even though I could, but I will use the pedals. Dropped it to second, And the feedback and the sound from the engine is absolutely incredible. And other than, like I said, the handling being in that stiffened damper control mode, which is what I want to do, is naturally take that back into normal mode, which is what it is now. I can now drive it for what it is, for what it has to offer, the chassis and the suspension being in normal, comfortable mode, powertrain being in sports mode, drop a couple of gears back to second. And the sound is just phenomenal. This being twin turbocharged, it doesn't disappoint. And handling wise, everything that is put into this car is basically F1 technology. And the handling is so direct. I mean, you point it somewhere or on a line and it will do exactly as instructed. And I hope I've covered everything from the history, the context of these cars, the reliability, and a lot of the reliability comes to a common sense approach. Have the car on trickle charge, have the car, basically looked after with a common courtesy you would afford to anything else in life, afford it to a McLaren. And you shouldn't be having any problems. And when you do, make sure you do have a report with a good independent McLaren specialist, because in the paperwork section, I will definitely be telling you how important that is. And we've done the test drive explaining the front axle lift and all the softer features and everything that comes with it. I think this is a phenomenally well-spec'd McLaren with the Alcantara headlining, Alcantara steering wheel with the carbon package, with the memory heated seats. And none of these features at any point takes away from the phenomenal, thrill-seeking, adventurous car this is. Frequently talking about the reliability on these McLarens. This being a much later 570S Spider, the monocoque chassis, they've ironed out some of the earlier production issues, i.e. the rear view camera screen lines up in the front rather than on that side screen there. But also ultimately any niggles that they've had, you can imagine any new sort of company making a completely new car from the ground upwards, you will have early production niggles. They've ironed them out with the later, and the same thing applies with the early 12Cs as well, in comparison to those from 2010, 2011 to those in 2013. They have, the McLaren did become a little bit better and adept at ironing out some of those little issues and the niggles. But the video is not going to be really about getting into all of those niggles. But ultimately, these are incredibly reliable, both in terms of the engine, the gearbox, and everything it has to offer. Some of the issues that sometimes people normally pick up, whether it's with their doors or whether it's with the windows, is sometimes it boils down to simple common sense things. One of them being, sorry, I'll put this window back up. One of them being is using the common sense approach. There's no point slamming these doors because they're soft closing doors. But if you were to simply press this button, what a lot of people do is straight away lift their doors up, or they are holding that button down as they are opening the door. Therefore, the door actuator is just heating up and overworking itself. And over time, when it fails, it's basically this whole section that would need to be removed to replace the door actuator. But the right way to open up your door here, simply press that button, wait for that window to drop, and once it drops, simply lift it up and off you go in. And the same thing applies to when starting your car. Now, when you are inside, it's the little things, don't slam the door, let it gently come in. It's a soft closing door. But when you've started your vehicle, make sure you've turned off the stop-start motor. But well before this, if I was to go back and take a breather, is, imagine I've come back from a spirited drive. What you don't want to be doing is straight away turning off your vehicle. 3-4 miles before you come to your eventual stop is drive it in the normal standard modes so that the cold air can cool down your sort of turbos and turbo feed lines and the rest of the vehicle. So you're not coming in spiritedly from your drive to turn off your vehicle straight away, because these little things are not simply maintaining and looking after the vehicle like it should be. But when you're starting it, you're not firing up that engine straight away. So all you do initially is press the start engine button, press it again so all these lights can come on. And once all these lights have come up, foot on the brake, start it up, and it says that your stop start motor there is activated. You simply press that button so that stop start is deactivated. And this is very crucial. And once the car is started, open up your roof, rather than your car battery not being on trickle charge and you've got into your vehicle, press that button so that there's power, but the car is not running to operate the roof, because what it does is ultimately unnecessarily tiring up a lot of these mechanisms. And before I can get into the rest of the features and to do more driving on it, I just would like to quickly show you how the roof opens up. Now, in terms of paperwork, I've got some of the main bits out there. This has got a fantastic service history and a file to compile all the service history down here for you. It's all been McLaren from the first mile up until September 2024. So it's the first two were McLaren Glasgow, and then all the way through McLaren Ascot up until September 2024. The 60th service in 2024 was a really big one at McLaren Ascot. That was done at 20,557 miles. And the one prior to that, well, they'd only done sort of less than 500 miles in 2023. And just to kind of give you an indication, and which is what I've explained so far, this is a McLaren that feels and drives and looks as if it's just driven off the production line yesterday, and it's like an absolutely brand new McLaren. It's HPI clear as well, so you've got all the essential ticks and passes here as well, so it's never been any sort of body work or accident whatsoever. And since it's had its first MOT in September 2021, it's passed every single one of its MOTs with 0 advisories. And in terms of the number of former keepers, it's got 2 former keepers. And I'll explain that in a minute here via the V5. It was Dr. Rajarshi that actually owned it since 29 November 2021. So 2 former keepers. And something that I've already sort of explained already with the first registration of this McLaren, first being registered on the 1st of September 2018. And this being a later 570S means that they've ironed out the problems that they had in that earlier McLaren 570 or S's or the 570 GTs or the 540Cs, whereby the first time they were making these, unfortunately, there were some production issues, whereas on the later, sort of the last on the production lines, they have made improvements with the carbon tub and just the overall feel and look to the vehicle, and the reverse changes, i.e. when you put it in reverse, you're getting the reverse camera on the main dash as opposed to the screen there. But overall, a much more improved car. McLaren, as you tend to, as a brand, whether you know it or you don't know it, the 12C was only sort of launched and, a mass-produced car in 2011, and then they went to the 570 in 2016, and it's a completely different chassis, different platform, suspension, the engine and a gearbox. Porsche's, there's subtle changes between generations. It's never been a revolutionary product in that sense. It's not been a product that they've completely, with Porsche's work with a completely new platforms, but with McLaren's 12C was a completely separate product. The 570 is a completely separate product, and the McLaren Artura is a completely separate product. Therefore, I think the really sweet spot on these McLarens are definitely that 570Ss and a later 570, not just the S, but the GT, or ultimately the 540Cs. Whereas the 12C, you know, I think it's the first attack at a road car. When I say mass produced, if you actually look at the numbers of what they were producing, even in the 570s, they sort of varied from anywhere between, you know, 1700 to 2400 per year. So they didn't really mass produce them and the hundreds of thousands, because they're handmade. It's a carbon tub, so you can appreciate there's a lot of engineering that is from the F1 that goes into making these cars. But all the kind of things that I've already talked to you about and explained and discussed in the video. But certainly this is a very later 570, therefore it's a much more improved, and the condition and the example this is in, it feels and looks as if it rolled off the production line yesterday. And incredibly low number of owners. If you've had sports cars before, sometimes they can change hands at least once per year. That's the MOT sort of record here, where it's been done every single year, and it's not had many miles between 2023 to now. Just to continue, this is basically the record of all the all the services, including the 1 mile run-in check at McLaren Glasgow, and then it went to the first service at McLaren Glasgow, second one McLaren Ascot, third one at McLaren Ascot, fourth one, fifth one, which is 20,045 miles, and sixth one at 20,557 miles. I mean, it's done 500 miles more. And that sixth year was really a big, massive service. So the next service is a minor service, so you don't have to break your wallet to do that service. The other thing that's quite important to know, that this having the full McLaren service history means you can actually put it on the McLaren warranty program. Is that something I recommend? Not really, because I think they've got you by the B, and ultimately they can cost a lot servicing with McLaren in comparison to a really good independent McLaren specialist, and you get a much better service with an independent McLaren specialist as opposed to having it in warranty with McLaren, servicing it with McLaren, because really you don't have that personal touch with a smaller independent business that is enthusiastic about these cars, that kind of love them for what they are. And ultimately the servicing cost with an independent is about £500 for a minor service, and a major service could be up to about £1,000. But ultimately, even in terms of parts availability and doing something under warranty is much easier with an independent than at the main dealer, because unless the main dealer is making £10,000 to £20,000 in a car, unfortunately they don't really want to know you in terms of servicing. It's great having it, because a lot of us folks out there think the main dealer ultimately provides a better service, but having been in this trade for all these years, I think ultimately the better service is definitely provided at a good independent. And so if you would like us to do that next service, we'll be more than happy to do so. So here in the file are the photocopies of the service book as well. This comes with the original owner's manuals as well. So ultimately I've covered everything I needed to, from the way it looks, the way it drives, the history of the McLaren brand. And you know, you still look at it and you wouldn't for a single minute think that this is a £90,000 sports car or a supercar, because it screams at you thinking that this is still, you know, £250,000 product. So that's the I think beauty and the niche and the unique selling point of what the McLaren really provides and brings to the forefront so well. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and let me know what your experiences have been like at a main dealer, cost, etc., versus at an independent. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye bye.